Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. You may be asking yourself, how much damage can Team Biden do on their way out the door? And I was wondering that myself. There is something called the Congressional Review Act, so that regulations adopted at the last minute can be repealed if they get enough people to do it. But I also thought I would turn to a state litigator, in this case, Elliot Gaiser, who's the Solicitor General of the great state of Ohio. Good morning, Elliot Gaiser. I said that the wrong way. It is great to talk to you. Where do I find you this morning? You in Columbus?
That's right, Hugh, and it's great to be with you from Columbus, Ohio, in the beautiful state of Ohio.
Even though our Browns lost yesterday, you are a Cleveland guy. Am I correct about that? You went to The Ohio State University
That's right.
before the University of Chicago, and you're a Hillsdale man, right?
That is true. Honored to be a Hillsdale man. Yeah, our Browns lost. I guess the silver lining is maybe that helps us get a better draft pick next time. But
in fact, we moved up to number 7. Where'd you go to high school in Cleveland?
Yeah, so I was actually homeschooled all the way through. My family, this was back in the 90s before the school choice movement had really taken off, and we didn't have a lot of means, so my mom taught me and my 2 younger siblings everything from math and science, and my dad was a small business owner, and we were in Cleveland proper because my grandpa lived down the street from us. He had worked for Ford for 33 years. That's why we lived 8 blocks away. Could walk down to his house. It was a great way to grow up. And the thing that I get to do now with Attorney General Yost is defend that way of life against all of those onslaughts from Washington.
Now, I want to talk to you about Ohio versus EPA, which was decided in June of last year. But before I do that, I just have to say I'm not easily impressed by a resume, but where I see University of Chicago Law School, then you clerk for Judge Rao, then you clerk for Justice Alito, then you work for Boyden, who I knew back in the old days of the Reagan years, then you have been teaching at Ohio State, and you're the Solicitor General of Ohio. Holy smokes, slow down, Elliot. This is amazing. Are you never not working?
Well, I've been accused of being a young man in a hurry before by Dr. Arnn at Hillsdale and others. But, the country that we've been given is too great a thing not to give it your absolute effort. And, yeah, you mentioned some of the great mentors that I've had, like Judge Jones, Judge Rao, Justice Alito, and former White House counsel Boyden Gray. It's one of those things where if you do your best in this country, you can still go pretty far.
Yeah, I didn't even mention Judge Jones, and she may be mad at me. Usually Judge Jones is a listener to the program, The Great Fifth Circuit Lion. Sometimes I lie awake at night thinking, Souter Jones, and he picked the wrong door. George H.W. Bush did. Tell me something, Elliot. I really wanted to ask you about U.S. versus EPA, or Ohio versus EPA, and what you are worried about right now. Are you keeping track of what the federal government is doing to the states in this sprint of the left to the exits?
Absolutely. So under Attorney General Yost, Ohio is currently, right now today, party to 44 cases against the federal government, where Ohio is either leading a state coalition or we are defending with another state that is in the lead. You mentioned Ohio versus EPA. One of my deputies argued that case past February. Justice Gorsuch, in a 5-4 decision, very narrow, stayed that rule, which would have imposed onerous and really ruinous regulations on Ohio's energy grid, made it impossible for us to have guaranteed, reliable, affordable energy. And what I'm worried about right now is that people will take their eye off the ball. So we're watching carefully. We have a petition at the U.S. Supreme Court for continued review in that case about the fact that as soon as the D.C. Circuit got the case back after the stay order from the Supreme Court, that was an interim order, the EPA asked for a do-over. Now, the Clean Air Act doesn't allow a do-over, but that's what the EPA is trying to do. They're saying, if we just explained better why we impose billions of dollars of costs on ratepayers, on taxpayers, and on energy industry, then it will be fine, even though the Supreme Court has already concluded that likely Ohio is going to succeed in our argument that this was not a lawful regulation. And you can go down the line. I mean, Ohio is leading a state coalition protecting students against compelled speech from compelled pronoun policies, which is a flagrant violation of the First Amendment. But lots of schools across the country believe that because the Biden administration has said Title IX requires, people to treat people who are biologically boys as if they're girls on their say-so, that entitles them to transgress these fundamental Bill of Rights boundaries to protect individual liberties. And so that's why the Ohio Attorney General's office is standing in the gap for them.
So, General, tell me why you decided to do this job. Because with your resume, you can work anywhere you want and do anything that you want to do and get in line to become a federal judge. Dave Yost is my favorite attorney general, and you're working for a great guy, and you have 44 cases. But why would you do this? Because you could be banking a lot of dough right now.
Well, you're right. Two reasons for that. Attorney General Yost is the first one. When I first met the Attorney General, our conversation turned very quickly from Supreme Court precedent to C.S. Lewis and the great books, and I realized that I could have in him a really wonderful mentor in the life of Ohio and the life of the law. And secondly, it's always been my dream to be able to represent the people of my state, to be able to stand up and argue on their behalf in the courts of appeals. The Ohio Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court is truly a dream come true. The people of Ohio in the last election, I think, made resoundingly clear that they don't want complacency anymore, and that they haven't given up on the possibilities of our future, that our country is still radiant with opportunity. And that's what I think President-elect Trump and our great junior senator, now Vice President-elect J.D. Vance recognize, that the American people aren't done yet, that the people who crossed oceans and prairies deserve that kind of zealous representation of their interests on the world stage and domestically.
I'm talking with the Solicitor General of Ohio, Elliot Gaiser. Elliot, how did you decide to go from The Ohio State University, where you began your university education, to Hillsdale? This has got nothing to do with watching the federal bureaucracy, but I'm just curious.
Well, that was actually a really tough decision. I started at Ohio State in law school, and I had resisted going to law school. Everybody I knew, everyone who cared about me, told me that the high school speech and debate homeschool kid was probably destined for a life in the law, but I took some time off. I worked for my dad's business. I got to work at the Heritage Foundation in D.C., and really I thought I wanted to get back to Ohio, and Ohio State has the flagship law school here, and I've always been a Buckeyes fan, and so that was a really great perk. But I also had some professors at Ohio State after they looked at my goals and my grades, and they said, Elliot, you have the ability to serve your state perhaps even better if you took a leap of faith. And so when you transfer in law school, you sort of zero out your GPA, and as you know, Hugh, the first year of law school is kind of a form of trauma bonding.
Yes.
If you've seen the cold call experience, you build sort of a band of brothers with your 1L classmates, your first year classmates. But Hillsdale's motto, I'll say a Latin phrase, virtus tentamine gaudet, it means strength rejoices in the challenge. And I thought the challenge of transferring to the University of Chicago was one I couldn't really pass up. And that I vowed I'd come back to Ohio, and I'm grateful that in the wisdom of Providence, I've been able to find my way back and into the role working here for the Attorney General as the Solicitor General.
Well, this is so fabulous. I actually sent a note to Larry Arnn. I said, I'm going to be talking to the Solicitor General of Ohio about protecting us from the outgoing Biden-Harris team. And he said good things about you, so that might surprise you. But from Hillsdale to Ohio State Law School, it's an amazing resume. It's an amazing journey. I am just curious whether or not you think Biden and Harris are up to no good in the last month.
Well, yeah, I think that they are. I think if you look at the foreign policy stage, there are all kinds of things that are happening that seem like they might be binding the future administration or trying to do that. You mentioned the Congressional Review Act. That has a 180-day look-back period. And so I can tell you that March and April of this past year and early May, It felt like the Biden administration just backed up a garbage truck and dumped regulations out within days of that look back window. Right now, I think on the domestic front, the things I would be concerned about are litigation strategies that make it more challenging for the incoming administration to represent the will of the people in how they want to continue to enforce the law. You see, the executive branch, any regulation or rule that they adopt, that's enforcement. It's Congress that ultimately makes the laws. And the question that I am always asking in federal court is, what's the fit between what the executive branch is doing and what the laws by the people's representatives actually say? And right now, I think that fit is quite poor. If you look at, for example, the SEC climate disclosure rule, where Ohio led a petition for review in the Sixth Circuit, that would have required every single publicly traded company to disclose immaterial information in excess of the statutory mandate for the SEC, which wasn't to play JV EPA and regulate the climate. It was to ensure that our financial markets are stable and can maximize returns for your and my retirements. And so we're watching.
General Gaiser, here's the key question. And we might go into the break about this, and I'll put it on YouTube. How do you keep track? Justice Gorsuch just wrote the book Overruled. We don't even know how many federal agencies we have. How does a state keep track of the rules and regulations impacting its state so you don't miss a window of standing opportunity?
I think that's a good question. I'm on the Federal Register website constantly, and I also work with my fellow states to track issue areas. So one of the things that a Solicitor General can do is sort of be an ambassador in these state coalitions. A lot of states have similar interests, and we do our best to keep our ear to the ground. So you can sort of look at it, what the public can see, but we also talk to people in Washington, talk to our representatives in Congress about what we think is coming down, and talk to those people who are going to bear the brunt of the regulations, the people in our states who are concerned about regulations on energy, on schools, on our retirements.
Stand by, Elliot Gaiser. I got one more question for you. We'll add it to the YouTube video. Welcome back, Mary. I'm continuing to talk with T. Elliot Gaiser. Solicitor General Gaiser represents the Buckeye State, and I wanted to talk to someone about manning the ramparts during the period of time when everyone kind of has a Christmas truce. So, General, how are you doing that specific thing? The last minute, push it out the door nonsense. If you've got 44 cases going right now, you probably will be at 54 by January 21st. How do you watch for that? Is it just the Federal Register?
It's not just the Federal Register. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we talk to people who are the regulated parties themselves about what's coming on. And then, for the environmental regulations, the Clean Air Act actually imposes obligations on the states. So Ohio's Environmental Protection Agency is in regular collaboration with the EPA, and they sort of, can call us up and say, hey, Attorney General's office, something's coming down that's really going to be difficult for us to enforce. It's going to be really onerous on our industry. An example of that is the methane rule, which, Ohio has hundreds of methane wells. We have great Marcellus shale natural gas, and that rule basically just says, even if it's a small non-producing well, the state is obligated to expend its resources to cap those wells and capture, that absolute little marginal amount, even though we don't even have the resources to do that. So we're watching, we're on the ramparts, Nehemiah at the wall, building with one hand and holding a sword or a spear in the other for litigation if necessary.
Okay, last question. The Sixth Circuit. Is there a better circuit to argue in front of than the Sixth Circuit right now?
I think the Sixth Circuit, it has one amazing advantage that puts it head and shoulders over all the other ones, in that it is the most Supreme Court reversal proof. If Chief Judge Sutton, who was Ohio's second Solicitor General, so I get to stand in the shoes of a giant in that respect, if he writes an opinion, I think it is in the best possible posture for the middle justices on the Supreme Court to say this is reasonable, this is an excellent application of the law. And then there are many other wonderful judges, Judges Nalbandian and Larson and Thapar, who are real luminaries and lights, Radler and Murphy, who is also a Solicitor General. I actually
Have you
interned,
argued before Judge Thapar? General, have you had to go before Judge Thapar?
I've argued in front
That's
of him
got to
twice,
be
actually.
that's got to be a legal obstacle course. What is that argument like?
He is incredibly intelligent, but the two cases that I argued in front of him were en banc. That was the full Sixth Circuit. And actually, I want him to be on every panel that I can get because he can pick up what I'm laying down and persuade his colleagues. One of the best cases, we recently had the foreign money and election ban, where Ohio protected our constitutional initiative process from foreign entanglements. And Judge Thapar wrote an amazing opinion staying the preliminary injunction that had been entered against us. So a lower court had ruled against us, and Judge Thapar said that that survives strict scrutiny because of the compelling interest the state has in protecting its process and protecting democratic self-government by citizens of the state of Ohio from people overseas who want to control what our fundamental charter says about our rights and liberties.
General, I know you've got to go. Can I keep you for 2 more minutes? I want you to explain that on air to people.
Absolutely.
Can I do that? All right, General Gaiser will come right back after the break, America. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, America. I'm not easily impressed. And so when I heard about Elliot Gaiser, I said it can't be the case because he clerked for Judge Jones on the Fifth Circuit. He clerked for Judge Rao on the D.C. Circuit. He clerked for Justice Alito on the Supreme Court. He's Ohio Solicitor General. I heard about him because of Larry Arnn. Dr. Arnn's very proud of his Hillsdale College graduates who go on to clerk on the Supreme Court. But we were talking during the break, and I want to go back to this. Measure 1 in Ohio in this past election was defeated. It was an attempt to gerrymander the gerrymander, and it was funded from overseas. Is that what the lawsuit is that you were just talking to me about, General?
Yes. Governor DeWine signed this past August as part of the compromise that would have allowed the Democrats to hold their convention late, a ban on foreign influence in Ohio's initiative elections. We have a broad ability to amend our Constitution, but we want the Ohio Constitution to be amended by Ohioans. That's democratic self-government. Well, a constellation of left-wing groups, George Soros extremists, sued to argue that that ban on foreign money in our elections violated the First Amendment. It's been my privilege to defend that case. And we won a stay from the Sixth Circuit of the injunction the lower court entered against us. So the lower court said, this does violate the First Amendment. The Sixth Circuit said it likely does not because Ohio's compelling interest, I mean, going back to George Washington, the founders were very concerned about foreign entanglements and foreign interference with our ability to govern ourselves. And so it's just common sense that you wouldn't want Swiss billionaires or overseas groups dictating to us what our laws are, especially laws about, for example, how we are represented in our General Assembly or in Congress. And that issue went down. I think part of the reason it went down is because we banned foreign influence in our money, in our elections.
You know, when I interviewed your boss, General Yost, I was in Ohio with Americans for Prosperity before the election. And we talked with Bernie Moreno, we talked with Dave Yost, we talked about this and the fact that it was believed widely that foreign money was coming into Ohio to try and pass Measure 1. I did not know you had had a challenge and that you got a stay from the Sixth Circuit. Did that get appealed by the dark money groups? They don't want to take that anywhere near the Supreme Court, do they?
They didn't take the stay to the Supreme Court. We're currently undergoing cross-appellant briefing on the preliminary injunction itself in the Sixth Circuit. So we just filed our first brief in that a couple of weeks ago, making the simple common sense point that Ohioans need to believe in our process and believe that our process has the integrity to which they are entitled. Everyone should believe that they're governed by Ohio citizens in Ohio and not by billionaires overseas. And
I have now found my expert. I have now found my expert on this, and I thank you for that because people don't understand how the dark money machine. The folks at the Ruthless podcast talked a little bit about Speaker Johnson's worry that Act Blue was accepting foreign gift cards, and we'll get more of that. But now I've found my expert in the Solicitor General of the great state of Ohio. Elliot Gaiser, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to tell Dr. Arnn you got through the first Hugh Hewitt show without a pratfall. When you were at Gibson Dunn, by the way, what kind of a lawyer were you?
I was an antitrust and an appellate lawyer. I worked with Gene Scalia and a number of other really great litigators there on antitrust issues, and then also challenging the administrative state from private practice.
Yeah, I was a Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher summer associate 10,000 years ago before clerking on the DC circuit. So it's like I'm talking to a young version of myself. Thank you so much, Elliot, for joining me. And congratulations in winning against the EPA. And I hope you continue to win for the state of Ohio. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to having you back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. That's remarkable.